Hello, 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 and welcome to the very first video of this channel. Ooh, ooh. So for the first video, I kind of wanted to start off with a banger. It may not be very original, but I thought, why not, as a beginner, provide a tier list of all 15 of the first fantasy books that I've read since my whole reading revival. That's what I'm calling this, by the way. It's been 15 years since I actually picked up a book. Oh, actually, 15 years, 15 books. Oh, I just realized that. Yeah, it's been 15 years since I picked up a book, and that was, of course, the last Harry Potter book. So today I want to provide a beginner's perspective on essentially some of the most popular books that are being recommended in fantasy. So I just figured that since I had spent so much time researching and trying to figure out the best books to read as someone that's trying to pick up fantasy, I figured there are a lot of other people who are probably in the same position, who are interested in exploring the genre, and they probably did the same shit that I did, right? They probably went on Goodreads, they probably went on, what are the top 10, what are the top 100 best fantasy books, blah, blah, blah. And so I wanted to share kind of like which ones I've kind of been disappointed with, which ones that actually lived up to the hype, and which ones just kind of align with my personal preferences, even if they're not necessarily the best books. Before we get started, I want to kind of quickly share how I started reading again. And I think that'll kind of give you guys a little bit of insight into how I'm going to be rating and reviewing and ranking these books. Back in like 2023, I want to say 2022, 2023, I decided to do a digital detox, and I was just kind of sick of being on my phone all day. I just have an addictive personality, and so I really felt like I had no self-control when it came to my phone and when it came to just like watching shows and stuff. I'm kind of like an all or nothing person, and so for 30 days I decided to do a digital detox, and so that meant no watching TV, no Netflix, no social media, and so essentially no digital entertainment. That meant the only form of entertainment that I was allowing myself was reading. I knew for sure that I needed to find books that completely displaced or filled that gap that watching TV shows or movies or doom scrolling left. And so that's why it was important for me to find books that I enjoyed. And that's why I figured, okay, since I love watching sci-fi and fantasy and like anime and things like that, those are like my main genres. And so that's why pretty much all of the books that I read since this whole reading revival started, it was all fantasy, since I do love movies and TV shows that are in this genre. Honestly, a lot of my preferences and what makes a show or a movie great for me is really just ported over to books. At the end of the day, I don't know enough about reading from a technical standpoint to comment on like prose or anything like that. But what I do know is how a book will make me feel. So that's the most important metric to me. If I say, oh shit, a lot, like the oh shit counter when I'm reading is a very important metric to me. Yeah, and everything else, I'll just make some commentary on the things as I'm kind of going through the ratings. So, and I'm gonna review the books in the order that I read them. So the first book that I read was The Name of the Wind. Harry Potter for me is what made me fall in love with reading when I was in middle school. Unfortunately, I think that's why this was doomed to fail from the beginning, because I intentionally had searched for a book that kind of is in that like academy setting. At least for the first book that I was gonna read, I wanted to feel the same things that I felt. And again, I think that's why the expectations on this first book were just too high for myself. I think that's why I was a little disappointed, because I wanted to feel what I felt when I read Harry Potter. I think there's a skill with reading, because my mind was so distracted. I would have to like reread sentences over and over again because I just didn't have the ability to focus. So maybe one day I need to give this book another chance, but it just in terms of like what I wanted to feel, it just didn't hit. I guess I was hoping for more excitement, larger stakes. I wanted more of like a page turner, and I think this book was okay, but it felt like it was more for the vibes. I was looking for like something that was super engaging, and I was just kind of bored at some points of this book. So would I recommend this to a beginner? I can't. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna recommend this to a beginner, because at the end of the day, I want to feel something. At least if you're the type of reader that I am, I don't think this would be a good book to introduce you to the genre. Yeah, it just wasn't for me. All right, we're already going to get to something pretty controversial here, but I read The Way of Kings, did a whole bunch of research, and the first scene, it was really exciting for me. I was like, oh, this is dope. This is what I'm looking for. Like, very interesting magic. You know, the combat seemed pretty dope. And then you have to read through like 900 pages to get to something interesting again. I am not down for that. I'm not down for that whatsoever. I think there were like 100 pages. I would have to admit, we're pretty interesting. We're pretty engaging. If more of the book was that, this would be much higher for me. But I really can't put this too high on my list because, again, everything is personal preference. But the way I see it is like, let's say there was like a 10 episode season of a TV show and only the last episode was really good. And everything else was just kind of like, it's kind of cool, but nothing's really like pulling me in. I can't recommend this to a new reader just because you have to sit through a lot of uninteresting things, in my opinion, to get to a really interesting thing. Yeah, this to me is like maybe it's a little bit more interesting than Name of the Wind. I personally would not recommend this to people in general, and I wouldn't recommend it to a beginner. All right, next we have Words of Radiance. The reason why I went to Words of Radiance was because I saw everyone online say, oh, just get to Words of Radiance, just get to Words of Radiance. What I will say is definitely a step up from The Way of Kings. But if I'm going to be completely honest, a lot of the problems for me, which pacing at the end of the day, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but there's this tendency to kind of like leave the best parts right at the very end. And that was just so disappointing to me because, you know, I really feel like you should make every word count. And there are a few books in here that I think didn't take up that many pages, but still delivered impact. I don't know, maybe the buildup was necessary with like Kaladin and everything too, but I just feel like you could have done that all in like 400 pages, not 800 pages. I will definitely say there were a lot more like, oh shit moments. Everything felt more elevated. Everything that's more exciting about the book. There were more of those moments and the peaks were higher as well. Still, I was just reading through it and I was like, holy shit. Like, how many nights do I gotta go through of just opening the book and closing the book and just feeling like kind of bored? And there were a lot of those nights when I was reading this book. So unfortunately, it's still gonna be in B for me. The density of good pages versus bad pages, just the ratio is not good to me. So I would say this one is, I can't recommend it to a beginner reader. For these books, I think you would have to probably read like a few other fantasy books before jumping into these books to maybe appreciate it or to really enjoy it. That's the way I see it. Sword of Kaigen. I'm gonna throw that up in A. The magic is cool. The action is cool. How a book makes me feel is number one. You know, a part of me was like, I did have a problem with, you know, the peak happening in the middle of the book and then the rest of the book kind of just being kind of chill. It made me question whether or not I dropped this down to B, but what it made me feel. No. Damn, like I didn't know I would like feel a little emotional about a book. That book did its job in terms of making you feel the fucking emotions. The magic system is also really cool. I think the way that they capture the culture, the vibe, and the aesthetic, I think everything is pretty cool in this book. So would I recommend this? Yes, I would absolutely recommend this to a new reader. It's a standalone, and so it's not a huge investment, and it's an easy read too. All right, so for Jade City, this is gonna be really fucking controversial, but Jade City, I'm sorry, is a D for me. I did not finish the book. I left off on page 432. The book ends on 495. And I just kept going through it. And every time I would pick up the book, I would be like, I'm so bored. As I read a few more fantasy books, and I kind of thought about like what I like about these books and what I don't like about these books. Jade City, I can't name a single like favorite character of mine in Jade City. Whether it's like the older brother, whether it's the younger brother, whether it's the sister, like none of the characters speak to me. Like even when things happen to them, I don't really care that much. It's not that I don't have the capacity to care, because there's gonna be some books down the road here where I cared a lot about the characters. I kind of feel like the author just didn't provide enough depth of the character, or they didn't feel fully realized. They just kind of felt really flat to me. Like I said before in the beginning of the video, a lot of my preferences come from what I like in movies and TV shows. And so when people were saying, oh, it's like The Godfather except Asian and there's magic and whatever, right? But you know, to me, I was like, oh, mafia aesthetic. I'm thinking of was the most recent thing I watched? Oh, I was like, oh, Peaky Blinders, right? I love that show. Obviously, it's a different culture and whatever, but for like a mafia movie or TV show, or I'm hoping a book, there's something like core foundations of those shows or movies, right? Which is the main characters, or some characters, they gotta be like badass motherfuckers, right? Like they gotta walk into a room and they gotta command the room, and they gotta have like presence. You gotta feel the aura. And I hate that Gen Z took that term and now just made it fucking lamer than it is. But aura is a good word, right? Especially for a mafia movie or a mafia TV show. Like Thomas Shelby, he steps into a room, before he says a single word, it's his presence, right? It's his status, it's his influence, it's his mind. And I never felt that with any of the characters, and it didn't come across to me through the pages. And another thing too is like, sure, in these like mafia type movies, you have violence and gore and everything like that, but more importantly, it's about one-upping your opponent through tactics and strategies and planning and deception. You know, even on that part, I kind of felt like there wasn't any of that to me, honestly, across the board. And plus, like, you know, I would have expected like the action to feel cooler too, but I don't even know why. Like I love good action sequences, but even the action in this book, it just didn't do anything for me. If you're anything like me, like I couldn't recommend this to a beginner. So sorry for all the people who love Jade City. All right, moving on. We have Never Die. I think after Jade City, I was just like, just give me something quick and dirty. Like give me something that will just be an absolute page turner. Who cares about the characters? Who cares about, like, I just want something that's just like satisfying, and I'm like, oh hell yeah, and like moving on. I found this on BookTube, and it was just really bad. We can't go that low in quality. There was like grammar issues and stuff in it, and it was really very much like a stepwise function. You start here, and then you meet someone else, they join your squad, fight someone, meet someone else, join your squad. Very just formulaic. And I mean, the action and kind of like the magic and everything was kind of cool, but I would not be recommending that to anyone. Fuck. Okay, we come to Red Rising, and of course. And so at this point, I got into like a reading slump. I don't think I read for like a whole year or year and a half. Yeah, I don't know. I was just kind of like disappointed with most of the books that I was reading. And so I just wasn't excited about anything really. When I wanted to start reading again, I wanted to make sure that it was a very addicting book. I wanted to make sure that it was a page turner, something that was just like satisfying. I was like, let me try again. Let me try something that everyone loves, and something that's just a fun book. And so with Red Rising, it was fine for what it was. Fuck, I feel like I'm just being a hater, but it was fine for what it was. But to me, I think there were just too many problems with it for what I needed it to do, which was I just needed it to be a page turner. I just needed it to be fun. It did that job well, but everything else, I feel like the quality wasn't there. Whether it was like the writing style or the way that the author describes a scene or describes an emotion, I feel like the characters, again, everything felt flat. They didn't feel like they had texture, they had depth. It just felt like they were just props in this little scene. There are certain things that kind of started to annoy me a little bit. Some parts just felt like lazy writing. There was a scene, for instance, and this is not a big scene, but this is, so it's not like a mega spoiler or anything. So, you know, there's a scene where someone walks into a room and someone's like working on this like puzzle. So in my mind, I'm kind of thinking it's like a high-tech Rubik's Cube. And then the character, he goes up after they're all done, and he goes up and he grabs this puzzle and he just like solves it, even though the other guy was like working on it the whole time. He couldn't figure it out, but this other character just walks over, he's never seen it before, goes up and he just like solves it. That to me is so fucking lazy, dude. That kind of writing is just so, it's cringy. It lacks imagination, I think, and you might as well just say this character very smart. I don't know, I guess there are enough of these kind of moments where I was just like, that wasn't very clever. If you're gonna write something that shows how smart someone is, show it in a smart way, you know? I don't know. It's just those small little things for me that just kind of kept stacking up that made me feel kind of whatevs about the book. I think another thing too is that the reason why I like fantasy and sci-fi is because it really takes you to a different place. It's really the fantasy and the sci-fi elements that fill me with wonder and provide a lot of enjoyment for me. And so for sci-fi, I really love how creative an author or a director or writer can get with how they imagine the future, how they imagine the technology and its applications for needs that evolve over time. I just felt like in terms of the technology side of things, nothing was really that cool. I sound like such a hater. Gravity boost, okay, sure. And especially the whole setting was them in essentially just like a primitive land, and there's no technology there. So that was also slightly more disappointing. Would I recommend this to? I wouldn't stake my tastes on this. I'm not gonna lie. Like I just don't think it's a good quality book. I'm gonna say I'm not gonna recommend this to a beginner. But I don't know. I guess I'm willing to give people second chances because I gave Words of Radiance a chance and I also gave Golden Sun a chance. What I will say, it is definitely a step up. The prose just feels like it was a completely different person. I feel like the way that he would describe a scene was just a 180. And I think in Red Rising, the first book, it kind of felt dumb. Oh God, I'm gonna get so much hate for this. The sentences were just fucking weird sometimes. I'm not gonna lie. And so with Golden Sun, it definitely improved on that significantly. It really felt like a different writer, but there were still some parts of it that to me were just lazy. The relationships, I don't know. I guess like you think about your own relationships, right? You think about the brotherhood that you have or the family that you have, and you think about what makes those things a good relationship, and you kind of look for some of that in the relationships in the books that you read. And again, like everything I said about Red Rising 1, the characters are just flat to me. They're not that interesting. They don't feel like they have that much depth. And the writing was a little lazy at times too. And I'll tell you right now exactly the part that almost made me put the book down right at that very moment. I'm also gonna redact all the names, and it's not a huge plot point. I'm just gonna describe a moment that happens that for me, I was just like, oh God. Chapter 32, page 280. And I'm gonna keep everything very vague so I don't spoil anything. And I'm not gonna reveal names. I'm not gonna ruin the plot here, but this is just, I need to provide this example. You know, so they're essentially in this meeting. They're all gathered around and everyone's like, yeah, this person doesn't belong in this meeting. Like, this person needs to get out. Why should we trust this person? And the person that's being asked that says, I trust blank for the same reason I trust any of you. Friendship. The power of friendship? Really? Dude. Come on. When I read that, I was like, holy, how can I take this book seriously? So I almost stopped reading it at that very moment. It's just so cringy to me. Imagine like a Jedi Council, or imagine like a historical like war movie, and they're like sitting around, they're like, this is a really serious concern. Like, we don't know if we can trust this person. Like imagine any of those scenes in a movie or in a TV show, and someone busts out friendship. Oh God. But I kept going. I will say the last scene was a fucking banger though. If it wasn't for that last scene, it would have been lower for me. I'm not gonna lie. I'm giving this a low B. I can't continue this series because there are enough of those moments for me where it just takes me out of the experience completely. Would I recommend it to a new reader? I'm gonna say no. I'm sorry. It's not all doom and gloom, I swear. We get to a stretch of books now. These books are what made me an avid reader. It is May 2nd right now. I finished Golden Sun on like March 26th or something like that. And I read 7 books in about 5 weeks. Unsouled. It's a progression fantasy. This book is simple. You can say the characters are flat here too. That's a fair assessment, but it's fun and it's satisfying. Out of any of the books that I've read so far, this book is an anime in book form. It's a page turner. When I was looking for like things like Never Die and things that are like really fast paced and everything, it's this series that satisfies me in the way that I really was looking for. It is a progression fantasy, so you have to start small and so you can go somewhere. And so it's just a simple, quick, fun read. Like I finished the first book in 2 days. It's only like 350 pages, so I really enjoyed it. Again, personal preference wise, to me, it's higher than Words of Radiance. I feel like people are gonna be flipping their tables and shit when they see that. And so would I recommend this to a new reader? I would recommend it. I would say manage your expectations. It's not profound. It's not poetic. It's very simple, but it's fun and it's fast. The next book, Lies of Locke Lamora, A Baby. Up until this point, this book was the best book that I read. I think after reading all these other books, it was just really refreshing to read a book where it just fills out your imagination a little bit better. And in terms of what is being experienced when the character walks into a room, the tension that they feel, the emotions that they feel, the dialogue between the characters is really fun and engaging. And you know what? Funny enough, I'm not gonna lie, in terms of the mafia vibe, I think Lies of Locke Lamora does it better than Jade City. It's just kind of piratey, but I think it's really cool. One of my biggest problems is when a movie or TV show or a book, they don't get like the psychology right. When decisions and motivations just make you go like, why do they do that? Yeah, Lies of Locke Lamora doesn't have any of those problems. The story was good. There were a lot of moments I was like, oh shit, hell yeah. I think what really surprised me, actually, I would say by the end of it, I wouldn't say like the story blew me away. It was good, but it didn't blow me away. But what was really interesting was that by the time I finished the last page, I knew I wasn't going to read the second book just because I read that it didn't do it for a lot of people. So when I read that last scene and they're all riding off into the distance, I felt sad. And I really didn't expect that. I didn't expect to be so attached to certain characters that knowing that I'm not going to read them again, I think it made me kind of sad. And that was a really interesting emotion to experience, knowing that like I'm not going to see their brotherhood, I'm not going to see their banter, I'm not going to see their witty humor. And that was really surprising to me. But that also told me that, yeah, maybe characters and the relationships and the way that they're depicted is really important to me. And that's something that I didn't expect, but I thoroughly enjoyed. Would I recommend it to new readers? I would definitely recommend it to new readers. Next is going to be Soulsmith. I'm not going to say too much about Soulsmith. To me, it felt like a lot of what happened in book 2, but it just continues. There are moments that are satisfying. He gets an upgrade. It is what it is. Would I recommend it to new readers? Yes, I would. The Will of the Many. This is an interesting one because everyone loved this book. Everyone loved this book, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. There are a lot of comparisons that are drawn between Red Rising and The Will of the Many. And I will say The Will of the Many is way better than Red Rising. The way that the author describes a scene is, I think, a lot better. Nothing feels too jarring in that sense, where in Red Rising, sometimes it just felt, the writing style, it just felt jarring. I think with The Will of the Many, it just didn't satisfy me the way that I thought it would, just because everyone loved it so much. There are a lot of things that I liked about it. It does provide some oh shit moments. I kind of mentioned this before too, where a lot of what I like about fantasy and sci-fi is the fantasy elements, you know, like magic and shit. I think what I was kind of disappointed about the whole magic system was that at a certain point, it started to feel like, you know, electricity with more steps. How will is essentially used from a more like engineering standpoint, and they have to like study it and everything. Maybe this is a spoiler, so I don't know. This might be a spoiler for me. If I had known this before reading the book, I'm not sure I would have read it. He doesn't have powers. In this world of magic, he doesn't use magic. He doesn't have an extra like cool quirk. He's just hardworking and he's smart. That's it. I think in that part too is just a little disappointing. I think after halfway through the book, I just really wasn't invested in the characters and the story too much. But I will say I enjoyed it more than Brandon Sanderson. Maybe I should think about it in this way. Would I have recommended to myself? Damn, I don't think I would have recommended it to myself. I'm not going to recommend it. Next was The Rage of Dragons. It was just something that I knew also was a page turner, and I knew it was really satisfying. It's like also a progression fantasy. Didn't really do it for me. Again, it's very simple, and I'll draw comparisons with the Cradle series. It's very simple, and sure, like overcome your obstacles and get stronger, blah, blah, blah. I wasn't that hooked. I think mainly it's because maybe the magic system didn't really do anything for me. Combat was kind of cool, very satisfying that he gets stronger and does his thing, but I personally would not recommend that book to beginners. Blackflame, this is Cradle 3. This is going up here. I know that in terms of quality of writing and just like the overall quality of the book, it's not better than Lies of Locke Lamora. It's very simple. It's not gonna paint like a beautiful image in your mind, but oh, it's so sad. It's so fun. It's so satisfying and it's so fun. I love when things scale up and it just feels grand. It's starting to feel like epic and big, because the previous 2 books were fun. They were enjoyable, but you know, naturally in the beginning part of his progression is gonna be, everything's gonna be really contained. And it's really in this book when things start to pop off. There were good enough moments in there when I was like, oh shit, And it felt really good. And I read this in 2 days as well. Okay, and this is what I'm gonna say too. These books are about 350 pages, okay? And if you combine 3 of these books together and you compare that to one Brandon Sanderson, The Way of Kings, page-wise, it's actually almost exactly the same. 1,050 pages for all 3 Cradle books, and then it's gonna be like 1,100 pages for Brandon Sanderson's The Way of Kings. When you think of the comparison in that way, in the 3 Cradle books, you'll have a lot more moments where you're having a lot more fun than Brandon Sanderson's The Way of Kings. Blackflame, I had a lot of fun with it. Luckily, this series is 12 books, and I heard it gets even better. You know, after reading like a heavy, like serious dark book, I'm just gonna throw one of these in there, and it's gonna be like a palate cleanser. So would I recommend this book to beginners? Yes, I would. It's really fun. The Blade itself. So I actually just finished this today. As you can see, like in some of my other books, I was like, oh, I think I need fast pace. I think I need a page turner. I need to be like hooked on the story. So I thought everything was plot for me. And when I heard that it was a character driven story, it kind of intimidated me a little bit. I also heard that there's no plot. I was like, dude, I think I'm a plot person. I think like this is not going to work out well for me. But I had nothing to worry about. The Blade itself, S tier book. Holy shit. This is what fantasy is about. It's fucking peak. It made me realize things about my preferences as a reader that I didn't even know that I had. Even if there's no overarching plot, it's really the characters that make you feel anything. And I think what Joe Abercrombie does so well, even from the very first page, is giving us a glimpse of the character's inner world and giving us such a unique voice across all the different characters, all these decisions, all these like little inner thoughts that they have. It feels like it's not too far off from what a real person would say. Every single character was so interesting and so well written that a problem that I mentioned in Jade City, where I was kind of thinking like, who's my favorite character in Jade City? I don't have a single favorite character because none of them are really that interesting to me. I have 5th tier side characters that I like more in the Blade itself than I do in Jade City because they make an impression. That's what it is. I'm just realizing right now, for whatever reason, these characters have left an impression on me. And so through this book, I realized if this is how character-driven stories are, then I think characters matter more to me than plot. By the end of this book, there's still growth and there's still change and there's still promise for like a lot of change and a lot of growth in the future with a lot of these characters. You know, initially I thought maybe the magic would have been more subdued and maybe in a little bit more in the background, but he showcases magic in a way that makes it sacred and mysterious and it doesn't feel cheap. And the way that he writes the action sequences, I think out of all these books, I like the way that Joe Abercrombie writes action sequences the most. And there were a few chapters in here where it really makes you feel something. There was this one chapter at the end of part 1. After reading it, I felt like a heaviness in my heart after reading a certain scene. And that's such an interesting thing to experience because why do I feel a certain emotion for this person that I've just read on a piece of paper? It's just so weird to me. I've never really experienced these things before, like Sword of Kaigen, you know? All in all, this is to me the gold standard now. So this is obviously the best book that I've read since this whole reading revival. Yeah, if you guys enjoyed that, I don't know, I think more people will hate me after seeing some of my rankings. But yeah, if you want to hear more thoughts from a beginner such as myself on some of the other books that I read, be sure to drop a comment and just let me know, which book should I read? Which book do you absolutely disagree on in terms of my rankings? I want to know. Like, what did I get wrong? What am I missing? Well, this was fun. I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace, peace, peace.